Thanks to Blue Beetle arriving on streaming services, I finally gotten to rewatch this movie for the first time since I'd seen it in theaters. Believe it or not, I'm more than happy to say that I love Blue Beetle even more than I did when I first saw it. Upon this second rewatch, I grew even more fond of this movie and its characters to the point where I'm willing to make what I think is a definitive and bold statement. In my opinion, Blue Beetle is the best DCEU movie ever made, and it's not close. See, I told you. To a lot of people, Blue Beetle is nothing more than a by-the-numbers superhero origin story that doesn't take enough creative risk to make it stand out in the ever-growing and overly saturated superhero genre of film. While I can see and understand that perspective, I disagree with that sentiment. Honestly, these are the type of takes that are unfair to a movie like Blue Beetle. It's more than just that. It's a movie that represents an entire culture, one of which I'm a part of, and it invites folks who aren't a part of that culture into it through the Reyes family. It's a movie about the importance of family and talks about this topic in a far more serious manner than a group of misfit characters who build cars from scraps that can somehow lift off into space to save the universe. Yes, Fast and Furious, I'm looking at you. The opinion or idea that Blue Beetle doesn't take enough creative risks and or liberties to make it stand out in the superhero movie genre often gets thrown around when people talk about Blue Beetle. To me, that sentiment is not true at all. Blue Beetle does take creative risks. It's just that they aren't done in a big action sequence, a big set piece, or in a way that's almost too obvious to the viewer. Where this movie takes its creative risks is among the Reyes family and their various emotional conversations with each other throughout the movie. Every single thing this movie goes out of its way to talk about, such as the struggles of being ignored by society, racism, Jaime feeling like a disappointment for not being able to get his family out of their neighborhood, or the Reyes family constantly being able to tough things out regardless of the blows that come their way, is a creative risk. These are conversations that we typically don't get to see or hear in superhero movies, and these exact conversations are what makes the Reyes family so lovable. They're arguably the most real, if not the most human group of supporting characters we've ever had in a superhero movie. From Jaime's dad to Jaime's chaotic yet lovable Uncle Rudy to Jaime himself, every single member of the Reyes family brings something to the table, both from an entertainment standpoint and an emotional standpoint. In the best way possible, Blue Beetle wears its heart on its sleeve, and its characters are an obvious representation of that. However, what's also a representation of that is this movie's biggest strength, which is the fact that Blue Beetle is unapologetically Hispanic. And I can say that as someone who this movie is directly made for and represents. Just for context and those curious, considering I've never really mentioned this in a video before, I'm Cuban. I understand all of the inside jokes this movie has. I can relate to the plethora of funny back and forths between the Reyes family, and I can heavily relate to Jaime Reyes as a character. Simply put, I am the target audience for this movie. This is also why, as a person who's the target audience for this movie, I love that despite being a superhero movie, Blue Beetle immediately hits the viewers with real stakes and real problems at the very beginning of the movie. Sure, the movie immediately sets up all of the superhero stuff we're actually watching the movie for, but the beginning of the movie is all about real world consequences. It's about the stuff that superhero movies tend to brush over and downplay as things that'll just get solved in no time because, well, it's a superhero movie. Stakes in superhero movies typically aren't all that realistic or carry that much weight, but in Blue Beetle, that isn't the case. The beginning of the movie piles on the loss of the Reyes family house, the loss of their auto shop, Jaime's family hiding the fact that his dad had a stroke while Jaime was away at college, and Jaime coming back and realizing that he's failed at achieving his dream of being the family member that saves his family from their struggles or the family member that helps his family have a better life. These are the types of stakes we simply don't see in superhero movies. Blue Beetle deserves credit for sort of being the first superhero movie in a long time where the issues these characters present at the very beginning of the movie are extremely relatable and have actual weight, at least to Hispanics like myself who relate to these real world issues. In all honesty, these are the types of stakes I love to see in future Marvel movies, Marvel shows, DCU movies, or DCU shows. Things that consume the lives of the heroes we love and know, but don't necessarily matter to the grander cinematic universe. All of these real-world problems or struggles surrounding the Reyes family that are presented to the viewer help make Jaime getting the Scarab and its powers truly feel like the Reyes family can't catch a break, or like they've received yet another burden on their shoulders. When a superhero protagonist, like Jaime, get their powers, it's always presented as this happy event or this massive blessing for a protagonist who was struggling one way or another. It's like, for whatever reason, and I partially wanna blame Sam Raimi's Spider-Man for this, superhero protagonists testing their powers is consistently depicted as this hype moment that goes so much smoother. It's always a couple of moments of the character messing around or struggling before they magically understand their powers. If it's not presented in that sort of fashion, it's more of an epic, oh my god, I have powers? I have powers? I can't believe I have powers moment for a superhero protagonist. As cool as that might be, especially with the right production quality or soundtrack cues, the chaotic switch up that Blue Beetle presents during Jaime's first suit up scene in the superhero movie genre was so needed. The very first Blue Beetle suit up scene is legitimately fantastic. It's probably my favorite suit up scene that we've seen in a superhero movie in a long time. I think it's so terrifying, realistic, and so much more believable than any other superhero suit up scene we've seen in the superhero genre. That's thanks to Jaime's family having the most hilarious and wild yet realistic reactions as they watch Jaime go through absolute hell. To me, these sort of reactions to a superhero getting their powers are exactly what we need to see more of in the superhero movie genre, because a suit up scene or typical getting powers scene shouldn't be as simple as the superhero movie protagonist messing around or testing things out for a few moments only for them to finally get the swing of things, Spider-Man pun intended of course. There needs to be more depictions of actual pain, confusion, and chaos ensuing as our superhero protagonist finally gets superpowers, because as shown in Blue Beetle, it absolutely works when it's done right. With how much Jaime goes through as the Scarab shoves itself up Jaime's wait, I can't say that, but Uncle Rudy knows what I want to say, that's for sure. You can feel Jaime's pain. However, what I love the most about this entire moment of Blue Beetle is that despite Jaime suffering this entire time, you swiftly begin to feel less sympathy as the scene goes on. I love the decision to have so many jokes flying from the Reyes family and having them have these chaotic yet amazingly hilarious reactions as Kajida is embedding itself into Jaime. Every single aspect of this pivotal moment pays off tremendously, because as awkward as it might feel to sit through such a painful scene, you're forced to see all of that for a more than justified reason: the long anticipated reveal of what is arguably one of the most beautifully looking superhero suits of all time. Whether this is a hot take or not, it needs to be said that the Blue Beetle suit is such a phenomenal looking superhero suit. It looks so good that it's on the same tier as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man suit. I mean that wholeheartedly, and truthfully, I think we take the amount of time and effort that was put into making that suit for granted. In a day and age where the superhero comic book movie fandom tends to consistently criticize new superhero suits for one reason or another, this movie wasn't afraid whatsoever to show off this suit. To see Blue Beetle show off the suit for essentially the entire movie after Jaime puts it on for the first time makes it so easy to love and appreciate such a stellar superhero suit. Think about it, this movie showed off the Blue Beetle suit so much and in such an unapologetic way that it almost felt like they were trying to make a statement about the suit's quality. You know what? It worked. It worked because of how much suit action we got in Blue Beetle. It's not like we had to wait until the final act of the movie for Jaime to see the suit's capabilities, and it's not like he had to go through some trials or tribulations to then be granted the suit. This movie forces the suit upon Jaime at the very beginning, and from that point on, Blue Beetle becomes a visual effects highlight reel in the best way possible. You know, the more I think or talk about the Blue Beetle suit, the more I begin to feel like the superhero fandom took how proud this movie was to show off its suit for granted as well. It's almost like everyone forgot that visual effects in superhero movies or shows have been hit or miss for a while now. We gotta appreciate the hard work and dedication that went into ensuring that not only that the suit was as good as it looked, but its powers as well. For example, the entire segment where Kajida tests out the suit's powers and features after Jaime gains superpowers whether he likes it or not. Get it? That's the tagline for this movie. It's just an absolute blast. This entire scene not only works contextually, but because it's hilarious to watch Jaime yell or scream the entire time while Kaji does whatever it wants to do. It stands out in the superhero genre. All of the suit adjustments made by Kajida allowed this movie to show off the powers in various locations like space or the middle of a city. All of the destruction that's caused in the process of the Blue Beetle suit being tested for the first time allows the movie to show the suit up close to the point where you can see Jaime's reactions despite having a helmet on. All of the reactions we get to see by real pedestrians in Palmera City as the destruction is going down in real time is exactly what we need to see more of in the superhero genre. To me, a superhero protagonist testing their powers shouldn't be such a simple scene or a high and by moment of a movie that goes by without any real world consequences or weight. There needs to be more presence to a protagonist in a city like in the Batman, where the movie's so grounded in realism that you can see and feel why people in Gotham would fear Batman. Blue Beetle's handling of this specific trope or a key moment of a superhero movie deserves so much credit than it seems to get. What's funny about all of this though, at least to someone Hispanic like myself, is that Jaime goes through all that hell only for it to end in the most realistic way possible. Like, yeah, we get to see all of these cool visual effects and we get to see the suit shine in the spotlight, but after all of that fun, he's immediately met with the exact perfect reaction from his family after crashing and burning in his own house. All of them being more focused on making fun of him than anything else. The fact that the Reyes family thought it was so funny that the Scarab burns Jaime's clothes when he suits up that they spend a full minute making fun of Jaime rather than trying to care for his well-being is so on par for a Hispanic family. I can't emphasize this enough. That is exactly what would happen to any Hispanic who somehow got superpowers and their family found out. Also, I loved seeing the Reyes family wake Jaime up with Vicks because as a Hispanic, I can easily say that that might be the most Hispanic thing in this movie. Not the music, not the family elements, not the cultural aspects of Jaime's neighborhood. It's the Vicks. As a Hispanic, this needs to be said, and believe me when I say this. Vicks is the answer to almost any sickness. Trust in Vicks. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, despite the amount of funny moments in Blue Beetle, there are a lot of speeches and emotional conversations. From Jaime and Milagros' conversation about their family's future at the beginning of the movie, to Jaime and his dad's emotional talk on the front porch of their house, to Jaime and Jenny Cord talking about the importance of family. However, the best speech in this movie is between Jaime and his mother. That's not to say that the other speeches or conversations that Jaime shares with other members of his family don't work, because they do. I love every small back and forth that Jaime shares with his family. However, hands down, no contest, the moment where Jaime's mom hypes him up before Jaime finally becomes a superhero contains the best speech in Blue Beetle. Jaime's mom doesn't get a lot of moments in this film, but Jaime getting hyped up by his mom to go kick everybody's ass happens at the exact perfect moment in this movie. After the emotional roller coaster Jaime and everyone else goes through in the movie, Jaime finally embraces being the Blue Beetle thanks to his mom hyping him up, which honestly leads to what might be the best payoff moment in this film. Jaime and Kajida working together to kick ass. We finally get to see the Blue Beetle suit and power in all of its glory with so many fun references and so many cool action moments. I'm not even gonna lie, the creative idea of letting Kajida highlight the emotional payoff moment that was Jaime getting hyped up by his mom by saying let's kick everybody's ass in Spanish absolutely pulled on my heartstrings. That perfect nod of showing how easy it is for Hispanic families to motivate one another was so beautiful, and of course it was hype as hell, as it's followed up by some of the best fight choreography we've ever seen in a DC movie. The actual fight choreography, the slow motion, the music, Kajida and Jaime finally being on the same page after so many growing pains, Kajida briefly speaking Spanish throughout the tunnel fight scene, and then a Mortal Kombat Scorpion reference to cap off such a fantastic part of Blue Beetle. This is everything I've ever wanted in a superhero movie. I can easily say that this is peak I Don't Beat Games because Blue Beetle feels like it was specifically made for someone like me. As a DC fan, Blue Beetle has so many things that work for it that allow it to be the standout non-Batman DC film. As a gamer or nerd in general, I love and appreciate these video game references like the NES Power Glove, the Final Fantasy references, and the Mortal Kombat "Get Over Here" line that Jaime says. Finally, as a Hispanic who happens to be a nerd if you haven't been able to tell, all of these speeches leading to even Kajida having a Spanish line here or there highlights how good of a job Angel Manuel Sotos and Xolo Maridueña did with making Blue Beetle. Like, man, the Buster Sword Final Fantasy reference in Jaime's final fight with Carapax is legitimately amazing. How can you not love Blue Beetle? That's a bit of a rhetorical question and me making a joke, but it would be wrong of me to not acknowledge 3 of Blue Beetle's biggest shortcomings: Jenny Cord, Victoria Cord, and Victoria's henchman Carapax. This video can't be entirely positive after all. Out of the 3, we'll start with Jenny Cord. Considering I don't have a massive problem with the character, Jenny Cord, to me, is such an underutilized supporting character despite having such a big presence in this movie. She serves the role of this movie's plot device. She's the reason Jaime gets the Scarab. She's the reason we get to learn about Ted Kord, who, by the way, has one of the best comic book headquarters we've seen in the superhero movie genre. She's also the reason that Jaime's dad dies, which then leads to Jaime's dad serving his purpose of pushing Jaime into accepting that he has to be the Blue Beetle during the final act of the movie. She's, technically, also the reason why the Reyes family's house gets destroyed. Jenny Cord is all of these things, except she isn't that interesting of a character. Like, yeah, she has a funny moment of playing the role of a viewer as she reacts exactly how we as viewers react to Victoria Cord's idea of trying to start an army of robotic soldiers, which is with sheer confusion and annoyance. It's just that I'd love to see more of Jenny in the sequel now that the Reyes family has accepted her as one of their own at the end of Blue Beetle. I feel like, beyond being a fantastic love interest for Jaime, there's so much more to explore with Jenny Cord and whatever story gets chosen for the Ted Kord related stuff, as that was left unsolved and open-ended in the post-credit scene for good measure. That entire mystery surrounding Jenny Cord is compelling and something that could give her a better presence within the Blue Beetle corner of the DCU. It also helps that Uncle Rudy talks about Ted Kord in Blue Beetle with a ton of fondness. That sense of love, appreciation, and aspiration Rudy has towards Ted makes this open-ended storyline with Jenny and Ted Kord feel like something that's both worth exploring in a future Blue Beetle sequel and something that'd give Jenny Cord the ability to grow into a much more interesting character. While we're on the topic of the Kord family, Victoria Kord is such a strange villain, because while she's very much the exact type of villain you'd expect in a movie like Blue Beetle, she almost always feels out of place tonally. For instance, this movie establishes, or at least makes it blatantly obvious, that Victoria is very racist. She purposely and obnoxiously calls one of her workers Sanchez throughout the entire movie, and at the beginning of the movie she makes racist remarks to Jaime and his sister Milagro. Trust me, Blue Beetle isn't trying to hide her very obvious racist perspective, nor is it trying to be subtle about the topic of racism, as there are various other moments in the movie where racism is spoken about by the Reyes family. However, Susan Sarandon, who plays Victoria Kord, is awful in Blue Beetle. This shouldn't sound like an insult considering I do love Shazam more than the average DC fan, but she plays Victoria Kord like she's the villain of a Shazam movie. What I mean by that is that there's never a moment where Susan Sarandon feels like she's playing a villain that tonally fits in Blue Beetle. 9 out of 10 times, Susan Sarandon plays Victoria Kord as this over-the-top villain who's always laughing, yelling, and being comically obnoxious. This gets in the way of almost every scene where she feels like a fish out of water. There's never a scene where she truly feels like she's matching the range of emotions that the rest of the cast of Blue Beetle brings to this movie. This is why Victoria Kord, in my eyes, is the type of villain I'd expect in a Shazam type movie instead of Blue Beetle. The Shazam movie franchise, which is probably dead at this point due to the DCU reset, but I digress, is a mostly lighthearted, funny, family-oriented movie franchise that's written to both make you laugh with the Shazam family and laugh at the Shazam family's villains, Dr. Sivana and the Daughters of Atlas. Yes, these movies have maybe a handful of serious moments, but for the most part, these are movies you're gonna laugh with or laugh at, for better or worse. Blue Beetle, in comparison, is a movie that's designed to make you laugh with the Reyes family and written to pull at your heartstrings for all of the right reasons, thanks to all of the various serious topics of discussions brought up throughout the movie's runtime. So with this logic, you'd think that this movie would have a villain or antagonist that has range, but unfortunately, that isn't the case at all. This generic, overly forced comedic villain with very little range that is Victoria Kord simply doesn't fit in Blue Beetle. She's needed, of course, for the overall story, but this is one of those characters that could have been so much better than what we got. She should have had serious moments that made us fear her and all of her decisions as she made the Omex a thing in Palmera City. Instead, we get this character that makes you roll your eyes more often than not, which is such a shame. Finally, this leaves us with Carapax, who could have been just as weak of a villain as Victoria Kord. He really could have, but thankfully, Carapax as a whole was saved and arguably redeemed by a creative decision that seems to be hit or miss depending on the person. What saved Carapax as a whole is Kajida and Jaime having a full circle moment of Jaime not wanting to use weapons when first fighting Carapax, to Kajida stopping Jaime from using weapons when he almost kills Carapax. That flashback scene showcasing Carapax's origin story, which does overstay its welcome just a bit as it didn't need to be that long, gave Carapax much needed depth. Without that scene, in my eyes, Carapax might have had as much depth as Bane in Batman and Robin. These are the moments that work the most for me in Blue Beetle because they create that much needed and more than welcome feeling of plot fulfillment. We go from Jaime establishing the boundaries in his moral compass with Kajida at the beginning of the movie to Kajida calling Jaime out and preventing him from making a mistake he'd regret in the long run. Kajida's doing that is thanks to Jaime's influence and his moral compass that Kajida was forced to learn when they first bonded. Kajida preventing Jaime from killing Carapax allowed this movie to subvert expectations with Carapax as a villain. Well, Carapax being your average supervillain henchman works in the beginning of Blue Beetle, considering it allows Jaime and Kajida to shine when they finally use their powers and weapons for the first time. Carapax needed to be more than that for him to fit contextually in the movie. Sure, it's a tad cliche that the movie directly tells us that he too once had a family that meant something to him, therefore we should feel sympathetic for him. However, the fact that we get to see this entire time that we had two genuinely opposing perspectives with Carapax and Jaime, it makes Jaime's line to Carapax about family making him strong so incredibly satisfying. It works not only because of Xolo's delivery, but because even at the very end of this film, this movie does a better job at emphasizing the importance of family than both Shazam movies did. Plus, honestly, Carapax killing off Victoria Kord for the greater good caps off a beautifully tragic character arc for what could have been an otherwise terribly cliche and one-dimensional villain character within the superhero genre. That's not to say that Carapax is a great villain at all. He's not. But these decisions redeem a villain character that would have truly been one of the most underwhelming or poorly utilized superhero villains we've gotten in a long time, like his counterpart, Victoria Kord. Flawed villains aside, Blue Beetle is my favorite DC EU movie ever made, and if I'm being entirely honest, it's also one of my favorite superhero movies ever made, period. I genuinely and wholeheartedly adore this movie, from how it represents my culture to Xolo Maridueña being stellar in the role of Jaime Reyes, loving the Reyes family themselves, and the stellar Blue Beetle suit along with all of the action-packed moments we get in the movie. It's hard for me to not hold this movie in high regard. I know, a modern superhero origin story movie in this day and age on paper shouldn't work, but in the case of Blue Beetle, it does. This is a character that the casual audience simply isn't familiar with, and with this being a massive uphill battle that needed to be addressed, I think the movie succeeded in telling the audiences everything they needed to know about Jaime's origin story. They couldn't just jump immediately to all of the cool parts we got out of this movie. Every reward or payoff we got in Blue Beetle had to be a payoff moment that the movie built towards. This isn't a Batman movie. While this may be an issue to some, it wasn't an issue at all for me, as every single moment between characters allowed this movie to showcase just how much heart it has from start to finish. Although some small parts of Blue Beetle left things to be desired, all in all, Blue Beetle means so much to me, and after rewatching it again, I can easily say that I'm so relieved that this movie came out and that we're going to continue to see more of Jaime Reyes and his lovable family, one way or another, in James Gunn's DCU. Blue Beetle is everything to me, and at the end of the day, I simply think that the movie deserves to get far more love than it does. Hopefully, in the long run, Blue Beetle will age gracefully, and over time people will come around to it, as I truly think that Blue Beetle is the best DC EU movie ever made.